Hello, Wembley. Let's get ready.
What on earth is all this shouting?
It's Rumble.
Jesus Christ. The pair of morons. You alright?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Winging It F1 podcast. Today, we're going to be ranking the 2023 F1 driver lineup because off-season, and that's what you do in the off-season. We're a few weeks out from car launches, which are quite early this year because the season is a few weeks earlier. But today, we're not going to talk about 2023 cars. We're just going to talk about solely on driver skill and where we rank these drivers. I'm Freddie. I'm joined by Nigel and Adam to completely throw random opinions at the wall based on some things just based on our general gut feel, some things based on science. And at the end of the day, we're just probably going to agree that McLaren is fifth. Okay, so Nigel, how are you? You feeling good?
You just done me dirty with the intro. I walked away and these guys have been recording. so I could have said some much worse things. But yes, I'm fine. That's to answer your question. There we go.
Answer my question.
Answer.
Adam, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm intrigued that you think there's a scientific element to our rankings. Really, that's the biggest takeaway that I've had from the introduction. But yes, I am very good.
I should just point out one quick thing. Since we last did an F1 podcast, James Vowles was announced at Williams as the boss. So, yay, that's good. All right, moving on.
And Andy Murray's in the quarterfinals now.
Yeah, and I'm watching North End later. By the time this comes out, then you'll know.
The quarterfinals is on Wednesday, but you know.
If you look at the North End result and see that we lost to Birmingham City, then just know that I was sad after this podcast.
Oh. And same for Brentford and Leeds, but relatively confident.
Are you going?
No, I'm not going.
Oh, okay.
He's doing this podcast, mate.
Plastic
schlepp to Leeds. Yes, anyway, so who are we ranking 10th? Adam, we're going to come to you first. 10th driver lineup.
So I went round and round in circles about this because I had a difficulty with the bottom three of my rankings. But in the end, I have gone for Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas, and Zhou Guanyu. Because I think out of AlphaTauri and Haas and Alfa Romeo, I think Bottas could be the best driver out of those, but I also think Zhou's the worst. So it's then kind of a difficult one. But yeah, I think I'm just looking at Zhou and I'm not sure he's going to take a massive step forward this season. I think, looking at his junior career and, he is very hardworking and very humble and seems to have come into the team with a great attitude. But I just think fundamentally, kind of the talent level or the star level, is it there for him to make a step up? I'm not sure based off what we've seen. So yeah, I think for that reason, and I think Bottas is the strongest out of the six that I mentioned, but I don't think that's enough to carry him through. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. I presume Nigel's disagreed.
I have disagreed straight away. I've got Alfa Romeo in 9th. Williams I've got in 10th. Williams? I do. Yeah. Are you surprised?
I'm not. Yeah. I've got Williams in 10th.
Interesting.
Yeah. Me and Freddie, every time we do a rankings, we always end up agreeing.
We don't, because I've got Alfa Romeo higher.
Okay, anyway, right, we're not enough.
Nigel, give your Williams for 10th pitch.
I just think, with all this, with all respect, due respect to Nicholas Latifi, who's obviously not on the grid this year.
He's not in the slide.
I know, but Albon, but that reference to Albon, to say how good Albon or bad or good Albon's season was last year, it's just difficult to measure. And then Logan Sargent, I think is very good, but then I don't know. I just think there's a lot of unknowns. It's got the most unknowns of any driver lineup, maybe.
See that? Yeah, for me, that's why
I don't know.
For me, that's why it's 10th, just because the unknowns of Logan Sargent. I disagree with you that Latifi showed Albon to be fantastic. I think Albon was fantastic if you compare that to where Latifi was with Russell and so on and things like that, when Latifi was more comfortable in the team, yes. But I look at that and think there's, star quality, to use Adam's phrase, in Albon. But there's the question marks with Sargent. He didn't convince me in any of his FP1 outings and the latter end of the F2 season. He was good at very, very good and has some very high points in the F2 season, but some not great bits as well. So this is the thing. For me, this lineup could have been 7th, 8th, or 9th as well, but just because of so I could completely change this after 3 races because I do think Albon is worthy of being a mid ranking in this lineup.
That's the thing to me. That's why I've got Williams ranked higher. It's just Albon.
Yeah.
I think you've got the potential there with Sargent more than I think you've got with Zhou. And then in terms of like the kind of top drivers in the team, I think Albon is better than Bottas. So
yeah,
there's
Nigel,
no.
you have Alfa Romeo in 9th, did you say? So where's
Yeah, I've got them in that. I was just gonna say there's no clear bad driver lineup this year. This is, I mean, I think I've said this for the last 3 years, but this is the best quality F1 grid like I've ever seen by some margin. Because
Yeah, I agree.
again, Latifi did drop the average quite a bit for me.
But he had good performances as well. He was capable.
Yeah, but if you think about the worst 5 or 6 drivers in the last five years, he's going to be in there. But now he's not on the grid. But yeah, I've got Alfa in 9th. Like Adam, I think Zhou, for me, he kind of peaked quite early on. In Bahrain, he was very good on his debut, very impressive. But then he didn't really get too much better than that. Yes, he had some bad luck in there as well. I just don't think his ceiling is that high. I don't really think he's going to improve too much this year. And then Bottas as well. I still think he's got a problem in the midfield because I think compared to other drivers, he struggles to follow cars, and that's why at Mercedes, for me, he had a racecraft problem, and that I think has kind of continued at Alpha. I think his speed is still pretty good, as we saw during his time at Mercedes against Hamilton, and he's shown that last year at times. But I just think on Sundays, Bottas and Zhou is quite a weak driver lineup overall.
Yeah, I clearly rank Zhou's season from last year very differently to you two. When we get to Alfa Romeo for my 9th ranking.
But are we like, I kind of did this as how I expect them to do this season.
Yeah.
So like,
yeah,
I think Zhou's last season was
for me. So I'm where I stand on these drivers now is where I expect them to be this season in a way, because I don't really know where they're going to be in 6 months, and they could surprise me in the way that, for me, I put Alfa Romeo in 7th. I'm going to jump way ahead for this because we're on the Alfa Romeo conversation. Because like you were saying, I Adam, about Bottas, I think he is the best of that sort of bottom 4 teams driver. I think he can pull that Alfa Romeo in qualifying to very good places, and I think he was quite unlucky last year. And I think Zhou actually consistently seemed to make decent strides throughout the season. From his starting point, yes, Bahrain, but Bahrain's a weird one because they have testing there. But if you take it from sort of Saudi then up, it was upwards, in my opinion. So, and I think for me, it's too early to question that glass ceiling. I think it does make sense to think, as you guys have, that he didn't show much year-on-year development through Formula 2. So it's a good reason to assume he wouldn't show much year-on-year development in Formula 1. But I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because I thought he made good strides last year. So I've put him there. And in 9th, I've got AlphaTauri.
So have I.
Yeah. Adam, present AlphaTauri then.
Yeah, they were another one that I found it difficult to rank. So out of the bottom, I think they may have the most potential. Or kind of them and Williams are the one with the most potential. That we could be sat here at the end of the year. They had a down year last year, but if they can, bring a better car for this season, if Tsunoda can take a step forward and really stamp his authority on that seat, and if De Vries can make good on his potential and cut out on some of his errors, then they could be a really strong dry lineup and have a lot of potential after this season. But it's just that's a lot of unknowns at the moment. I think you've got a rookie coming in with a few question marks over him, and Tsunoda, who is yet to put it all together. So yeah, based off that, then I think the kind of potential they've shown was enough to put them higher than Alfa Romeo, but those question marks prevent me putting them any higher than that.
Yeah, I pretty much agree on that. I agree. The potential is there again for them to be a very, very solid lineup. It just completely depends. I think Tsunoda's got a really weird sort of lose year this year. Like either it's like, oh wow, he beat a rookie, or oh no, he was beaten by a rookie. Like it's gonna. I hope it's sort of the narrative there can work pretty nicely, but I don't have much confidence in that, and I think that can get to him. I've a bit more, to be honest, I do have a bit more confidence in De Vries just because of the way he's applied himself to every race series over the past 4 years. And that I think that could be very impressive.
I mean,
And
again,
it's just all hope at the moment. So
with De Vries, how did he kind of take to Formula E in his first season? Because I know, he won F2 in his third season, but took kind of a while to.
He was learning.
Right.
I thought he was learning. I thought he really then, because that was the 2020 season. So to be fair, in his second race, he should have been on the podium if not for like a stupid penalty. And that was very good, very impressive. And he had some very good drives, and he was learning. That Merc car wasn't the best car, but he came second to Van Dorn in a race, and was punchy. And then immediately in his second season, the first race, which is the main one you could rank, to be honest, based on pace and just driver skill, he just topped every practice session, took pole, and led to the flag. And that for that season, that was the least random race, and he bossed it. But then the next year he was worse. So it's question marks. But
I think he's got a lot of speed. It's just, well, last year especially, he didn't show it consistently. I think in F1, that is my one fear. Can he do it every single weekend? I think he's going to have some incredible moments where he gets into Q3 in a car that perhaps doesn't deserve to be there, or gets a 5th or 6th place here and there. It's just whether he's got that consistency, which is very important in F1. But I rate De Vries quite highly, and Tsunoda I've always been a big fan of over the last few years. So I've got them in 8th, not that much higher than you two.
No, I think that's very fair.
Yeah, I mean the bottom 3 or 4 teams are really, really close.
It's like 0.1 gap between 7 to 10 for me, because like I was saying about I think we can guess my 8th team is Haas, but with the Bottas and Joe, it's kind of like Joe is in the 9th best team lineup as a driver kind of normally, but Bottas is higher than that, so it sort of pulls it up, and Albon doesn't quite pull it up as high as Bottas does because Sargent's lower. Magnussen and Hülkenberg are both reliable at best they can be, so that kind of gives them some kudos. And Tsunoda and De Vries could be up there with Bottas for me, and so could Tsunoda, but they're not at the moment. So they're where Joe a little bit around there. So it kind of that's my complicated thought process for 7, 8, 9, and 10.
That's kind of how I approached it as well. Generally, is look at, I guess, the best driver in the team and their gap to another team, and then see if that gap is made up by the second driver. So I think for but that's why I just have Williams a bit higher. I think I mean, especially compared to Alfa Romeo, I think Albon has the edge over Bottas. And it'll be difficult again because, like you said, with De Vries and Tsunoda, then there's also that benchmark question of Sargent compared to Albon. So he's almost in a lose-lose situation again, but can only go out and do his best. And he does have a contract for another year at least. So, I think for Albon, he has that edge over kind of any of the other first drivers in this little pack. But then I think, especially compared to Joe, I think Sargent does have that potential that, it might be a learning year, but I think there is that possibility that he can have that step forward. So that's why I've gone a bit higher. And I've got Williams in 7th.
Very nice.
7th, that is high.
No, sorry, 8th. I forgot which one we were on. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Nigel, who did you have 7th then?
7th, let me check. What did I put?
Wait, Freddie, who did you have 8th?
8th was Haas for me. So
okay.
I think we've all got the same 4 in the bottom 4. We just
in a different order.
They're just in a different order, which is quite fun. I like that.
So who wants
Adam,
to take
your
Haas?
bottom 4 was from 7 to 10. Go.
7 to 10. Haas, Williams, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo.
Nigel, 7 to 10.
That's not what you told me about 3 weeks ago, but I'll gloss over that. I've got Haas, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, Williams.
Yeah, and I've got Alfa Romeo, Haas, AlphaTauri, Williams. So, and I think realistically that could be that order in the constructors. So,
wow, yeah.
We haven't really discussed Haas. Should we just throw in a quick? Hülkenberg's coming back. I think we all kind of get the safe pair of hands route, but also we all kind of think probably Mick Schumacher could have done a similar role.
Adam didn't,
but Nigel and I do. So consensus. Where do we stand on it? Because Magnussen did go missing a few times last year.
It's a weird one. To me, I almost feel like AlphaTauri in the it's two drivers who we're not really sure where they are. I think, with Magnussen, he showed that potentially. He also did come in at very short notice. So with a full, season and now off season, then there is, I think there's reasonable grounds to hope that he will be coming in better prepared. So yeah, I think, but again, it's kind of, there's a lot of question marks over it. What level will Hulkenberg be coming back at? I think it'll be a good level as he showed in his standing appearances, but over the course of a season, that's a different thing. So that's one of the question marks. And then, yeah, as I say, Magnussen was, where did he line up with Schumacher? Where will he make a step forward from that this season? So yeah, I think it's kind of similar to AlphaTauri in a way in terms of there's a lot of unknowns there, but I just think the quality and I guess what they've proven previously is a lot higher than for AlphaTauri, so that's why I've got them ranked higher.
Do you think Hulkenberg will be better than Magnussen?
3 years ago, I would have done, but
I'll say yes.
Start of the season, no. Mid-season, yes.
Because I don't think Magnussen was that impressive in the second half of the season. So if Hulkenberg can't beat Magnussen, to me, that's not a great lineup, especially with all that experience as well. It should be a pretty good, handy lineup. But
yeah, come 2014-15, this could have been one of the top half lineups on the grid. There was a point where this could have been the Renault lineup in 2017, and that would have been a mega lineup then. But it's just we're 6 or 7 years down the line now, so it's interesting to see. But I am interested in this lineup. I'm not excited by it. I'm interested in it.
Yeah, I think interested as well. I maybe think that Hulkenberg could be ahead at the start of the season, but then as kind of the tolls of 23 race season, go through and it does come down to a grind. I think maybe that may kind of where Magnussen's having a year in the car may show a bit more. So yeah, but I think it will be. I think it will chop and change between who has the advantage. But I reckon Hulkenberg can be that.
Yeah,
and
it could do. It really could do. We don't really know because, like you say, there's a question mark about Hulkenberg in full-time competition. He hasn't done a full series in anything since he left Formula One. He's tested a few things, but the most regular racing for him has been stand-in performances in Formula One. So that gives it a level of just odd, frankly. It's quite a nice sort of, it's the kind of lineup you would be okay with happening for a mid-tier team in the 90s, but they would just sign a driver who's not been in Formula One for 10 years.
I still find it really strange how impressive Hulkenberg was on those one-off appearances, because you kind of think if he could do that, then what's he going to be like over a normal regular season full-time drive? But then we've seen that during his time in F1 over the last 10 years. And he wasn't exactly a special, amazing driver, was he? So it does kind of make you think you can't just jump into a car and do well. Like De Vries proved as well. It's very strange that. Whereas I do feel 20, 30, 40 years ago, that wasn't possible. It's almost like it's too easy to jump in. I mean, yes, you get lots of sim practice now. It's always too easy to jump in and do well.
But I counter that with, you look at someone like Alonso, and he came into Alpine after a few years out and struggled and learned and got on with it, and then got better and better and better with it. So there is an element of, but it's also really hard from that side to sort of sustain that. You can have a sweet spot, but to keep that sweet spot across is a much harder proposition.
I mean, I would also say if Hulkenberg can keep his level, I guess his average level across his career, or even like 2015 to 19, his average level across there, then he'll be a really good. It'll be really good. He'll probably beat Magnussen, and that that would put Haas comfortably sixth in terms of the lineup quality. So yeah,
I think that's very fair. Moving on to sixth, this is sort of for me the next sort of fractional divide, the sort of mid level. You've got the sort of B, A, and A star class for me, and this is the A class, and I'm a bit kind of like sort of the 654. I'm still questioning where I'm leveling on this. But I think I'm going to go sixth purely because of. I'm going to go with Nigel to tell me his, so I don't have to say it.
I'm not going to tell you, but no, I am. I've gone for Alpine. Okay. I think Gasly and Ocon is not as strong as let's say, Aston Martin's lineup, who I've got fifth, I think Alonso and Stroll. Alonso is better than Ocon, and I think Ocon and Gasly are at a similar level. And I think Stroll is not worse enough compared to Ocon and Gasly than the gap between Alonso and those two Alpine drivers.
I think
makes
the
sense.
complete.
Get you.
I think the complete opposite. I think the gap
Oh,
from
come on.
Ocon or Gasly versus the gap to Stroll. I think there's Ocon or Gasly to Alonso versus the second to Stroll. I think that is bigger. So yeah, I think they're kind of, I guess, composite quality over the two outweighs that.
Alonso was much better than Ocon last year, and Gasly and Ocon are at a pretty similar level.
But like they are both much better than Stroll as well. So
I don't think so.
I think Stroll is quite
I think
effective
so.
as a race driver, actually, and I think he's proved quite. Particularly, you look at his last race in Abu Dhabi, he was the one fighting to get Alfa Romeo behind them in the constructors better, really, and he had some very good sort of rear to points kind of performances throughout the mid season last year. It'd be a 10th place or a 9th place, but you'd go from a lowly qualifying position and plug away and be pretty decent at it. And I think you do have that. Just gives Stroll. It does give Stroll an element of an edge. I think, yeah, there are question marks about Stroll's highest ceiling, and he's had long enough to prove that he can improve to that ceiling, and it's not really done very often. But still, his natural level, in my opinion, is quite effective. That's why it's really hard for me here to make a decision.
If you
here.
look at the way people were praising Vettel, oh my word, he shouldn't be retiring. Look how good he is. He's in his final
All right,
season.
Nigel, get off your high horse.
Stroll wasn't that far behind. Like, it's not, so people should be praising Stroll as well, really. So,
But that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. There is an element of that then to then go to where Adam was saying and sort of say, well, how much better is Alonso at this point in his career than
Much
Vettel
better.
was? So,
much better.
so then we do have to sort of ask question marks about where Vettel was last year.
Uh,
So
you know, and the
rather
Aston was
than-
an improved car at the end of the season as well. Or you know, there's kind of that comes into it as well.
Yeah.
Like you know, it's the
But everyone was
benchmark
praising
difficulty
Vettel. Everyone was praising Vettel, weren't
great.
they? so if everyone's praising him, he must be doing well.
Well, I just did praise Stroll. So
Yeah. True.
I don't know what you're shouting at.
So who have you got for six? Don't
At
say
one point, I
Alpine.
had McLaren because for the same reasons that were question marking De Vries, I kind of got to use that argument on Piastri, but I don't want to because I do. If we're talking about a ceiling thing, I think Norris pulls that to one of the top drivers in Formula One, in my opinion, and Piastri, I think, has got a higher ceiling than Stroll, Ocon, and Gasly. And this is where I'm thinking of an element of the Alonso of it all. Fantastic driver, but also sort of not a team player.
Yeah.
So
that's
for
very
me,
true.
that's a mark down. And I know you can shake your head at that, Nigel, but you live in 1924. So where if you weren't a team player, it was seen as the best thing in the world. But I think you kind of have to be a bit in modern Formula One, and that's one of the reasons why there was a disaster at the end of Alpine last year.
Ocon's not a team player either.
Great, that I can criticize him as well. You helped that.
I'm just saying. It's not just Alonso. They're both.
So I'm thinking Alpine 6th, Aston Martin 5th,
That's the spirit. There we go.
McLaren
He's
4th.
gone with mine. He's gone exactly what I've gone for.
But I'm
There we
really
go,
tempted
Adam.
to put
No, let's
Aston
move on
Martin
quickly.
and Alpine tied.
You can't do that, Freddie. Come on.
Well, I can. I'm hosting this today. So I think I might put a joint 5th for Alpine and Aston Martin.
Joint fifth. Are we allowing that, Adam? A joint fifth? So
Yes.
no. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
It's an improvement on where it would have been for me previously. But
I do
yeah,
think I
just
do think if you put Ocon or Gasly in Stroll's position, it's a higher lineup. But I do think an Ocon and a Gasly outweighs a Stroll, but an Alonso outweighs an Ocon and a Gasly. A risk of having
exactly
to-
the same amount.
Yes, 0.6.
0.6, yeah, that was 6 attempts.
But if you think about it on a grid, with those cars relatively equal, you put, say there's only a 4-car grid, you go first Alonso,
Yeah.
second Gasly, third Ocon, fourth Stroll. And
But the margin
from
is
that-
not the same, is it?
well, from that, Alonso's leading it, and then the middle is Alpine,
Yeah.
and Stroll's bringing up the rear, so that keeps it the same.
So they've basically gone in between what me and Adam
But
have said,
yeah.
basically.
Basically, you
Because
really rate
everyone is in
Stroll.
between
You think
that.
he's going to be like the
that's
standout driver this
fact.
season?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Oh, well done,
Too late
Nigel.
now.
Congratulations on being the
Too late.
standout driver this season. So I've jumped the gun and given you a 4th place there. I'm assuming you guys have got 4th for McLaren as well.
yeah. We've all agreed with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
I think we all
wasn't.
agreed.
There wasn't kind
Lando
of too
Norris
much.
is excellent.
Yeah, there wasn't too much kind of debate in my head. I mean, in terms of, we've talked on this podcast before about where Piastri will come in terms of, how he'll settle into the McLaren with where others have struggled before him. But we're yet to see that. I think just in terms of the talent level, what they've proven in Norris's case, in his F1 career, and in Piastri's case, in his junior Formula career, this is uber talented, and it's that kind of carries it up to the top.
I'm still fascinated.
Yeah, it does make me feel like I should rank AlphaTauri a bit higher, because I do rate De Vries's pre-F1 career, maybe, but because I do feel a bit kind of guilty leaving De Vries in 9th with Piastri in 4th. So maybe I'll reflect on that. But that doesn't come
Piastri,
into
you
this.
would say, is more talented than De Vries, though, wouldn't you, Piastri?
Yeah.
Oh, I would do. But then for a driver we haven't seen in Formula One, compared to a driver who did do a one-off performance in Formula One, that was very good. Then it's, so maybe I'm going to put AlphaTauri in 7th. So anyway, while I just have an internal crisis
too
on
late
that.
now.
Yeah,
So
I know.
shall we recap our orders so far before we get to the top 3?
Well, let's talk about Lando Norris a bit first,
Okay,
because
actually, let's do that.
while we're on McLaren, because it's very easy to gloss over just the highs of his F1 career in a way that I think we all did last year, until we got to our ranking where I thought just before, like, oh, hang on a second. Yeah, second, Lando Norris. I mean, look at
Nigel
him.
didn't.
But it was kind of like, yeah, actually, he is one of the most effective, one of the fastest drivers in Formula One at the moment. And it'd be interesting to see the coming seasons for him, because I don't know about you, but there were definitely elements at this stage of his McLaren career for Lewis Hamilton that he was getting a bit hemmed in by that organization and where that team is. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Norris fishing around a bit this season.
Oh, yeah,
Especially with
completely
Seidel
agree.
leaving for Audi, Sauber Audi. I think that's something to watch.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I
think
Oh, go on.
I just think if you're to be honest, if you're Red Bull and if you still have 1 or 2 question marks over Perez this year, go for Lando Norris with everything you've got.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking.
That's just where I'm sitting.
That's what I've been thinking the last 12 months. But I didn't do the Team Bosses podcast, but I did think Seidel leaving McLaren. Yes, he might have been offered a bit more money in the Audi project. Is going to be exciting in the future. But I think
Close
that
to
does
home
say-
for him as well, to be fair.
Yeah, but I think it does say something about McLaren that I don't think he thinks they can get to the top. And I mean, yes, they've got a wind tunnel coming finally this year, which has been a long time waiting. But I think McLaren they've been stuck in this position for since 2018 now, and it's five years on. I think I don't see that changing over the next 2 or 3 years before the new regulations change either. So I do
You
think
can argue
Norris.
they're in this position.
I do think Norris should move on if I was him, if he can, and Red Bull will be a fantastic choice.
You can argue McLaren have been in this position since 2013, really, and
Yeah.
Well, no,
This should have
they've
been a
stepped forward.
slump.
They've improved from the worst Alonso years, and
Yeah.
yeah,
they-
but where
they're
they're able to improve to is where we're saying.
But
sort of
they've
they've
not been
put
in this
themselves
position
back.
since 2013. Like Red Bull have been won the championships in 2013 and 22, but you wouldn't say they've been in the same position for the whole period. It's the same with McLaren.
No, I wouldn't.
They're
But
in
I
the
would
same
say
position
McLaren have been in.
than they were 10 years ago, but not it's not. They are on, or they have been on.
No, I'm not talking about legitimate
one.
constructors championship. I'm not talking about legitimate constructors championship position. I'm just sort of saying from a technical
No, but I
future
just mean as a
mindset
team-
position of where that team is.
Yeah, I think they've been in a lot
I'm-
worse
I-
position in while Alonso and Honda and Renault and all of that debacle was going on.
Yeah, I think, but I think for the most part, with it is revisionist what I'm saying now, but I have that luxury. Is that there? When you look back at it, you can kind of think, and all through that, there doesn't really seem to be a way beyond fourth, apart from when Ferrari were bad, and that's kind of where I'm leaning with that. That I'm not. It's a broad. I'm not saying that they're in the same position as in like they're fifth, whatever.
No, I'm not. But
I'm saying
the outlook for them has been a lot worse in the last 10 years than it is now. At points in the last 10 years than it is now.
okay. Still, that supports the reason that we think Norris should go out. That it's kind of like it doesn't. It's still not a. It doesn't feel like there's a short term, even long term kind of route forward with it, because the same thing they've been doing for the past few years just hasn't elevated the team at all. Arguably, it's hit a stagnation, and it seems to always have been hitting said stagnation, in my opinion now. So it's just a case of looking around. I think Norris has a contract to 2024. He has a long-term deal that was.
I think it's 5.
I think it was 5.
Right. So it's going to be hard, but I do think he's proven he's got a fantastic management structure. That's how much everyone knew about Lando Norris before he was in Formula One when he was about 15, 16. They know how to sell Lando and they know how to maneuver around, and he was always in good positions with that. And that's how he got into McLaren. So he can use that to get out of McLaren.
I agree. Yeah. I think Red Bull in 2024, 2025 is a very good choice, and I can see that happening.
No, it might be
And
something
I think
for
the way he's.
it might be something for our McLaren season launch preview episode to talk about like what McLaren have to do for to kind of show Norris this season. What do they have to be proving, and what can they do to keep him?
Yeah, I think that's a very good topic. We can put a pin in it for now, and who knows, maybe because off season is off season, we might do a where's Formula One in 10 years kind of time conversation. Maybe 5 because 10's a bit far.
Probably won't be watching in 10 years.
Here's an 8-year-old Carter. Let's back him. But yes, Nigel, you wanted to do a recap 4 to 10.
Yes,
recap all of us.
Okay, all of you. Well, I've got Williams, Alfa Romeo. This is 10th to 4th, obviously. Williams, Alfa Romeo, Alfa Tauri, Haas, Alpine, Aston Martin, McLaren. Freddie has got Williams, Alfa Tauri, Haas, Alfa Romeo, joint Alpine and Aston Martin in 5th, then McLaren. And Adam has got Alfa Romeo, Alfa Tauri, Williams, Haas, Aston Martin, Alpine, and McLaren, which brings us on to the final 3 teams.
Not yet, it doesn't, because I've also been keeping track and giving championship points per position as we go. So our composite ranking is McLaren in 4th, Alpine and Aston Martin tied in 5th, although Alpine ahead on the alphabet. Haas in 7th, Alfa Romeo in 8th, Alfa Tauri in 9th, and Williams in 10th. Despite
we're using the F1 Championship like 25 to 1 points, by the way, in case not just like a random point system.
Yeah, we're not.
We could then afterwards we could do this with all the different point systems that have been used in Formula One, and then see how it tallies.
Well, that means only 6 teams will get points.
Yeah, I know. And then you could just say not applicable driver lineup.
And then we can do the one where you only get
sun on me.
You only get points from your best result, and then it's just whoever. And then we'll have a lot of.
Oh, what count back?
Yeah.
That would just be a lot of good results. That's nice. Like that would just be perhaps that could be 3 teams in joint first, but we'll get to that because we're going to join the A-star class of driver now. With the top 3 teams, we all have 3 teams to choose from for the top 3. Guess who they are?
We're gonna do a 3-2-1 for third.
We're gonna let's do Adam.
They're all different.
All right. Announce your third place teams in 3, 2, 1. Red Bull.
Ferrari.
But I get where
It's
you're coming
Ferrari.
from. The Perez ranking is bringing it down, and then what I was saying about the Alonso of it all in the team for Verstappen brings it down as well. I presume, Adam.
Yeah, pretty much that. I just, again, I think the gap from Leclerc to Verstappen is smaller than the gap from Sainz to Perez. Like we talked about how, Perez did take a step back last season. And yeah, I just think, they are Red Bull are the only team with, a clear number 2 driver. And that's what pushes them back for me.
No, it's Verstappen is much better. Verstappen's better than the rest of the field, quite frankly. Never mind just a Ferrari pair. And I don't think Perez is not that far off Sainz, I don't think. So it's a bit like the Alpine Aston Martin thing. We just think the gaps are different, but I think Verstappen is in a class of his own, quite frankly.
I think you're putting more, like in general in this ranking, you're putting more emphasis on like the top driver.
No, I'm just
Whereas
putting emphasis on the driver. I don't really care if it's the top or second driver.
So for me, I've ranked Ferrari lower purely based on pretty much Verstappen and Leclerc, because I do think I do think Sainz is a bit better than Perez, but I think Verstappen just pulls Red Bull way forward, and I agree with Nigel in that. I think just you look at Verstappen over the past few years, and he's the reason that car was involved in championship fights, basically. And I spoke about this at length at the end of last season for Leclerc. Like, for me, there was a lot of elements of from his side that didn't help his championship push, and I think there's more room for that to be cleaned up. So for me, I rank Ferrari below Red Bull because Verstappen is, for me, better than Leclerc because he's got less to clean up than Leclerc does, even if Sainz is better than Perez. So that from particularly where they need to be for these drivers at championship potential, I think the proof from Verstappen is there to back that up.
I think by the end of this season, we'll have a much clearer picture of it. I think we'll either.
I hope so.
Perez,
I don't think we will.
I just think either we'll have seen
when Lando Norris has been signed by Red Bull.
Whether the potential for Ferrari that when they are on song, then they're absolutely fantastic, but the wheels did come off a bit, and I think that did affect probably Leclerc more than Sainz. And maybe that's that's an element to that I didn't give enough weight to. But I think in terms of Leclerc can battle Verstappen if the cars are around equal, and we'll see kind of whether he can sustain that this season, or whether Perez remains closest to Verstappen a few tenths off, or whether he falls back a bit more, he's less of a factor in the team in their battles. So, or whether Sainz can take a step forward, or whether there's a big fight at Ferrari. I think by the end of the season we will have a clearer picture.
Perez's gap to Verstappen last year was bigger than Ricciardo's gap to Norris.
Yeah.
But Sainz's gap to Leclerc was much closer than that. So I do think there's an element of we could be underrating Sainz a bit here as well, though. So I do think there is definitely a universe here for me where Sainz's performance is the second best Ferrari driver, but not by much. And I think if we're looking at the 2023 season, I do think Sainz will be better this year because he did grind through a bit last year, and that definitely showed him being better at points in the latter half, in my opinion. So I do think that we could be looking at a better season for Sainz than Perez by a mile this year. But
it's a weird one. It
is really hard.
Like if I was a team principal and I could pick a lineup to have, then I'd take the Red Bull lineup. But going on,
I would, to be honest, I think Verstappen and Sainz as a lineup would be cracking.
Well, no, but if I could pick the Red Bull lineup or the Ferrari lineup to have in my team, or if I could take over one of the teams, I'd take over the Red Bull one because of Verstappen.
That's a good way to just do the whole list, really.
But then I guess that's not maybe talking about the strength of the lineup as a whole. It's the best chance they have to win
the
a
top
world
5 drivers thing last year. You said Leclerc was third and Sainz was like 6th or 7th or 8th, and then you said Verstappen was first, and then Perez was 6th or 7th or 8th. So surely that means
Sainz was ahead of Perez.
Vettel was better. Yeah, but by 2 places.
But then also, where's the drop off between Sainz and Perez compared to like the amount of talented drivers we have at the very top of the grid?
I don't know.
There's a bigger drop off to Perez, in my opinion. But this is a sticking point. There's a sticking point for me is that but Verstappen pulls it up. But also, when that car suited Perez more, he got pole position in Saudi Arabia. He won in Monaco and things like that. And Singapore, but that was more by people not being there. But he held off the Ferrari. So Perez, there is an undervalue that we're throwing on Perez because of the way he reacts to that Red Bull car. Because when that car has been good for him, he has been good. Like the start of last season, he could hold it for Verstappen until they built that car to Verstappen more, developed it to Verstappen, which Red Bull have admitted to, and Perez has admitted to, and it's gone away from him. And so there were points where the car wasn't suiting Verstappen as well, and Perez was doing very, very well. So yeah, you have to match the driver lineup to the team. So that does then hold Perez back, and the way that Verstappen can then just take that by the horns, no bull pun intended, but there is some, and can then, just go off into the distance. So yeah, it is just kind of like so for me, Red Bull's second because the max attack is there.
I can't wait till Adam tells us who he's got as first, because it might not be Mercedes.
Adam, who have you got as second?
Ferrari.
See how? Oh God!
What? No, that's exactly the opposite of what you said, Nigel.
Yeah, like how could Ferrari's not better than Mercedes?
He's
No,
not
they're
said
not.
that.
Ferrari
He
second.
said Ferrari first. Oh, I thought he said
said
Ferrari
Ferrari
first.
second.
Oh,
Well, that-
I had a shock.
Your head cannon is taking over there, Nigel.
So have you got?
You're like
have
a
you
fan
both
watching
got?
The Last Jedi.
Have you both got Red Bull second, or have you got?
Yeah, Red Bull second.
Red Bull
okay,
second,
then.
Mercedes first.
There we go.
Adam's changed his lineup completely from 3 weeks ago.
I've changed 2 teams.
No, you've not.
But he's allowed to change his lineup from
No,
3
you're
weeks
not.
ago, Nigel. Why are
I
you so
have
annoyed at
changed-
that?
Nothing
I
has
have
changed in
changed
the
2
last 3
teams.
weeks to make him
I
change that. To
I have
change his
changed
mind.
2 teams.
I've
and I'll
changed
prove
mine
it to you
today.
afterwards. I will
Nah,
prove
you've
it to
not.
you afterwards, Nigel.
No,
I
I don't-
changed 2 teams.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they
I've changed
just swapped
3
one
teams in the
position.
space of this podcast.
Anyway,
I don't care that you've changed things, Adam. I care that Nigel cares. But anyway, yeah. First, Mercedes. Then all of us agree, but do we agree for the same reasons? Let's find out. Nigel, why have you put Mercedes first? And
Well,
why are you
they've
going to
got-
argue with Adam about it?
they've got one of the greatest drivers in all time in Lewis Hamilton, and then Russell, I think, could be a future world champion. And I don't think any other team has that combination, do they? So I think it's quite a clear first. Not just the only thing that could bring it down is they don't work together, but in terms of pure strength, pace, quality, talent, Hamilton and Russell, it's one of the strongest lineups we've seen this century in F1, not just this year, I think. They've kind of got 2 A-star drivers there for you, even though I do think Hamilton is a bit better. But yeah, there's no other team that has that quality. So yeah, it's easily first.
Yeah, I think that stands up. And again, scientifically, stats don't lie. You've got Lewis Hamilton just in that team, which just is exceptional, and George Russell hasn't lost to a teammate ever in Formula One, so that's also very good.
Oh yeah,
It's fantastic. So, Adam, anything more to add on Mercedes being number 1?
It's just clear. Is this the only position we've agreed on? No, that and McLaren. So yeah, I think, yeah.
Did we all put
it's-
Haas 8th, or is that me making it up?
No.
Okay,
No, you put.
I put Haas 8th.
No, none of us. Yeah, you put. Me and Nigel had it 7th. You had.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, yeah. I mean, just it is just clear. You've got one of the greatest drivers, possibly the greatest ever, and then you've got Russell, who could very well be a future world champion, and stood up to him last season. So yeah, there's like, in terms of, if you were kind of scoring them in position on the grid and then adding that up, then there'd be no one close.
yeah.
As a wider question, do we think there's a problem that our lineups reflect so broadly the general competitive order of Formula One?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I don't think so. because I think broadly it shows that the best drivers are in the best teams, and then we've got Norris is kind of the outlier of that, and we're saying he might be at Red Bull. So I don't think so.
We're saying we want him at Red Bull.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think that's a good. I agree with that. We've got
there
to
is
hold
al-
ourselves to account though, otherwise we're not a proper essay.
There is also the argument though that like the car can kind of make you look better. Obviously, I mean, I completely
Or
agree
worse,
with
yeah,
the
completely.
like with the lineups we've got. Yes, the three best teams do have the three best lineups, but we don't know how good an Ocon can be in a Ferrari. He could be much better than Sainz or whatever, for example. I think in F1 or in motorsport, it's very car specific. Like with Norris, for example, we've only ever seen him in a McLaren. When he joins Red Bull, he could just be like Albon and Gasly against Verstappen, and then we all kind of slate him for that. It's very, I don't know, it's so complex, F1. There's a million factors that have to come together. So, yeah, I think it's just a bit of a coincidence, really, that we got the three best teams and the three best lineups. But like Adam said, usually the best drivers get the best teams anyway, 90% of the time.
Yeah, I don't think it's really a coincidence. I mean, like, look at the way Ferrari yanked Leclerc out of Sauber. If you show that talent in a lower team down the grid, then you will get pulled up unless you're Norris, where I think
Particularly if you're in their junior program.
Well, yeah, but
Well,
and
it's
that's
like-
another thing. There's a lot of there's that history of junior drivers going down low the grid, and then they do have that control. So yeah, I don't think it's I as I say, I think it's like broadly good for the sport that you've got most of the best drivers at the top of the grid competing for the top prizes.
Well, it's like Leclerc and Verstappen take their first seasons at Sauber and Toro Rosso. We wouldn't have put them in the top five list of that year just because of the teams they were in. But if they did that in a Red Bull or a Ferrari or whatever, we probably would because of the car they're in, because they would get better
Leclerc
results.
was very, very good in his first season.
Yeah, I wouldn't have put Leclerc in the top five in 2018. But then when he took all the most pole positions of anyone in 2019, I was putting him second or something in my
because of the
ranking
car. So this is what
the way he's able to show himself. Yeah,
this is the thing with F1. Like someone like Verstappen, he might have been the best driver every single season the last 8 seasons, but he's just not had the car to do it, and that's why we said Hamilton was. So I do think
if he was, then he would have been promoted.
And he was promoted in the second season, to be fair.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But that if he was being the best driver for that long in a junior team, he wouldn't be, because someone would bring him up.
But this is the thing. I think there's points in both arguments that stand up, and I think there is a point of we can say, wow, look, Verstappen's been promoted in his second season to the top line Red Bull team. He must be amazing. But also on that Spain weekend, we're all looking at going, can he do it? No, he can't. Loads of question marks on where he could be and how he could do it. Because of the way we were perceived with Verstappen, which wasn't right at the front fighting for a win. It was, fighting for an 8th place, perhaps, in a Toro Rosso. So there always are those question marks on a driver until they're in a team capable of success. And I think that's one of the reasons I've ranked Bottas well, is that he can win races even if he's in a lower team. And even now he's in, I said that wrong. He can win races, but he's in a lower team now.
Yeah.
But still, we know where he stands as a driver a lot more. That's what I'm trying to say. I muddled on words there, which isn't good for an audio.
But the actual quality of the driver probably hasn't changed that much. Probably.
No, it hasn't.
But yet we rank him differently just because of the car and team that he's in.
I put him seventh.
Yeah,
he's very good. So
I mean, kind of in general, what me and Adam have said, we've ranked him lower, probably just because of the team he's in. Really, because he's probably not changed that much in terms of performance from Mercedes. Yet we ranked him higher just because he was at Mercedes.
I think
what we're saying is ignore us.
I think it's a different case for like Bottas, who, no disrespect, isn't a future world champion, and it's like he's not. I think the really, really top talents who you can pin as they are going to be fighting for championships do get promoted, and I think really the only really top driver outside of the top teams is Alonso, and that's for Alonso reasons. But I don't think, like, when you're looking across the grid, if someone is standing out that much in a lower team, they will get promoted. So I think it's like talent pools at the best teams because that's like how top sport works. I don't think it's like a coincidence, or I don't think it's a problem or anything like that.
Yeah,
I
but then
think
when
it's-
they get to that top team, surely from the first, like say Verstappen, for instance, from that first to second season, he hasn't suddenly jumped, has he? He's probably like gone up a bit in terms of his quality and performance, but he's not made a sudden jump, has he? But then we've gone from him saying he's the 10th
It-
best driver in 2015 to like third or fourth best driver.
It does change
2016.
it. Being able to be in the window definitely changes it, but it also changes it for the worse. And there are elements of it in that you can then rank a driver worse based on how they react in a top team. And
it gets changed
look
because
at the
you're
way
in the
that was with
window.
Albon and Gasly and things like that. So there are sides of it that counter. We are going in loops now, so I do kind of think we should probably curtail that part of the academic analysis of our podcast and move on to one maybe more interesting, fun, quick round off question. How many of these lineups do we think will be in the same position in our minds, or maybe even just completely different at the end of the season? Or do we think we nailed it?
None of them will be different.
Yeah, stubborn Nigel as ever. Adam, do you think you could be? What are you open to being surprised or disappointed?
Yeah, I honestly, I reckon Mercedes, I expect, will still be top come the end of the season. Outside of that,
Could flux in flux.
yeah, I mean, the problem, like the three rookies, how they do will massively, could
Yeah.
massively change it. So that kind of takes three of the teams out the way of me being confident. One of them we've literally got joint, so we can't have them the same at the end. Oh, I
Yes.
guess we can.
That's
maybe,
Freddie's fault.
But
Thank you very much. Thank you.
and-
very much.
and yeah, I think again, like Haas have also kind of in that rookie-ish position because there are a lot of unknowns about them. So yeah, I'd say
Mad.
two. Just I reckon Mercedes and then one of the other nine might, but I couldn't begin to guess which.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes it kind of interesting. We have question marks, and it's nice to have question marks. It's nice to have 6 driver lineups that are entirely different to the last year, and that's fun. Who knows where the driver market will be come the end of 2023? That's a whole different question. I don't think we should go into that now because that would be way too much. But if you disagree with us, let us know. If you agree with us, let us know. If you don't want to interact with us, don't let us know.
Let us know.
Just interact with us in a nice, positive, happy way and give us engagement. Share us, tell your friends about us. Tell them where you can find the podcast, which is either on YouTube, on a podcast platform of your choice, on Twitter at Winging It F1. If you like Formula E, listen to our Formula E podcast that Nigel and I do. If you don't like Formula E, listen to our Formula E podcast that Nigel and I do, and just be vaguely confused. You can find Nigel's work on Eurosport and on totalmotorsport.com. You can find Adam's work on totalmotorsport.com and on Feeder Series. They've dropped the F1. To be more inclusive to Feeder Series, which I thought as a phrase is fantastic. And you can find my work on MSV social media channels, which is niche. Guys, any final thoughts on our top 10 driver lineups of Formula One? What? No, what? Oh, well, there's not going to be like an 11th. But anyway,
I mean, there might be.
that's true.
Oh.
Maybe Sergei Sorokin
changes.
will get
So-
a one-off.
Yeah, or some lineups change, then technically it's a new lineup, so you have to put it back. Well, then because it's the same team. I don't know. No final thoughts other than Nigel.
Nigel, what are your
Yeah.
final thoughts? Do you have
Oh.
any thoughts ever?
I don't have. Yes, I have many thoughts.
Do you have thoughts
you?
on finality?
Noticed.
No,
Okay. Well, anyway, everyone go and support Andy Murray. And
he's lost.
has he? Oh,
Oh well. Oh, Andy.
don't go and support Andy Murray. Oh well.
Yeah.
On
Oh.
that sad note of live sport, come back next time for a Winging It podcast. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.